Yeah, so good evening, everyone. Hope your day was good. Hope you had a great day. Now we are already coming to the end of our Canva training. All right, so we most likely are going to have our last class tomorrow. But today's class, like I mentioned on the group, is very important because if you don't really know what you are learning today, you may still have issues with creating really beautiful designs. You may know how to use the elements and the tools and everything, but if you are not really able to understand the mindset and everything, you would still have issues. So that's why today's class is really important. Okay. All right. So quickly, let's just have a word of prayer. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for today. Thank you for sustenance. Thank you for guidance. Thank you for protection. Thank you for provision. Thank you, Lord, for giving every one of us the privilege to be here. We started from day one and today is day six. Thank you for the grace you granted each person to be making progress in this. Thank you for what everybody has learned. And thank you because even after this whole Canva training, we will still keep making progress. We say glory to your name in Jesus' name. As we kickstart today's um class, we ask your God to take perfect control and you grant everybody quick understanding. Take control of the lungs of the trainer for today and help him to impact knowledge and make everybody understand what is being learned today. In Jesus' name we pray. So quickly, we are going to have Mr. Dari to take us in today's class. All right, so let's just please pay rapt attention. Yeah, and if you have any question, um, either you wait till question time or you type it on the chat box. But please don't interrupt the training session. So either you put your question on the chat box or you wait till the end of the class to ask your question. But once again, don't interrupt the teacher when he's speaking, okay, so that you won't be dragging everybody back. All right, so just wait till it's time or you put on the chat box. And attendance, kindly take attendance also because it's very important to this training. All right, so now over to you, Mr. Dari.
All right, good evening, everyone. Please, can you confirm if you can hear me?
I can hear you over here.
Okay. Okay, well, I think we should be good to go.
Uh,
All right. Please confirm if you can also see my screen. Please,
not
can
see. Okay, okay, we can see your screen. Okay, it's showing
okay, thank you.
the review.
So,
Yeah, can see your screen.
thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. How is everyone doing? I believe that this week has been a very progressive week for every one of us. We've learned a lot about Canva, and for those of us who know about Canva, I hope that we've taken the step further with the insights that have come in this week. All right, I first want to appreciate the opportunity to actually be speaking to us this evening. Right, to speaking to us it's such an honor for me. Yeah, and I hope that we're going to learn a lot as much as I intend to pour out this evening. Yeah, so I think I should just start by first saying kudos and well done to everyone for all the designs that we've done this week. I was opportune to go through a few of those designs as it was sent. The link was sent to me, and it's such beautiful designs that you guys have been able to come up with. And so today's class is going to be focusing on something called a design mindset, right? Design mindset, and I just want to make a case for the justification of um why this is necessary. And so maybe I'll just start by saying generally in life, right? This is a personal principle, and I think that this might resonate with a number of us. But I think that generally in life, the gift of our minds are quite special. The gift of our mind is quite special, actually. And so it's most times what differentiates one person from the other, the quality of mind that we have. And so let me see if I can use an example. For instance, a carpenter, right? A carpenter knowing how to use all of his tools, the saw, the plane, and every single thing, make joints with wood, is one aspect of his job, is one aspect of his craft. One more important thing, or I would say maybe the most important thing, is the mind actually. So anyone here can learn how to use a saw, anyone here can learn how to plane a wood, anyone here can learn how to use a sandpaper, but only one has to develop a mind, the mind of a furniture designer, the mind of a carpenter, to be able to do it as perfectly and as excellently as a carpenter would approach it. And so what am I saying in essence? I'm saying that it is so beautiful that we are here to learn about Canva, and that is really lovely. But something beyond just knowing how to use the tool called Canva is beginning to know how to think like a designer. What are the things that make a designer in the mind of a designer? What really goes on there? What are the inner workings of a designer? And I dare say that this is probably one of the most important things that we have to learn, because as I see everyone here might know how to draw a box on a canvas sheet on a screen. Everyone here can know how to write some text. Everyone here can know how to do any of those things, but really it depends on how we approach designs. And if we don't know one of some of these things that actually make up that happens in the mind of a designer, we may just think that we know how to use the tool. And yes, you may know how to use the tool, but what really makes designers is how your mind works. So a lot of the conversations we'll be having today would really be about talking about the design mindset and how those things happen. Right. Yeah. So let's just go ahead. One of the first things we want to talk about is color combination. Right. Color combination. And this is very important. I'm sure that everyone here probably knows what primary colors are, or what colors are really, what primary colors are. Everyone knows here that red, yellow, and blue are primary colors, right? And so, why is this important? It's important because this forms the foundation of how our designs come together. In every design you see, you always find colors in those designs. So we first need to know how colors work, and how maybe to combine them in such a way that it's the design that we are bringing in together as the a measure of excellence that we hope it does, right? Praise the Lord. Sorry, I said praise the Lord. I'm just used to speaking in front of God's people. But sorry. Yeah. So talking about color combinations, we have primary colors which are red, yellow, and blue. Everyone here knows. And everyone here knows that when you combine blue and yellow, what do we get? Just to be sure that people are following me, what do you get when you combine yellow and blue together? You can just type it in the chat. So thank you so much, Dami. Green is what we get. Thank you so much. And when you combine yellow and red, what do you get? Yellow and red, what do you get? Yellow and red, what do we get? Fastest finger, orange. All right. Thank you so much. Oh, someone said purple. Maybe the guys, person is Caroline is ahead of me. Yeah. So that's when you combine blue and red together. When you combine blue and red together, you get purple. Thank you so much, Caroline. All right. So yeah. So those are basic things we need to know. Now, when we are doing a design, what really do we have to think about in terms of colors? There are lots of ways to actually look at colors. There are lots of ways to approach it, right? And so maybe some of us know something called the color wheel. If you know the color wheel, is there any way you can indicate if you have heard of something called the color wheel? Can you indicate somehow? I just want this to be as interactive as possible. Okay, someone is saying yes. Is there a way you can raise hands if you can? So I just see the number of us know what the color wheel is. So I know how much I'll dwell on the color wheel. I'm not yet seeing hands. Does that mean okay? Okay, I can see. Okay, I can see a couple of us. All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So this is an example of the color wheel. Like we just said, yellow, blue, and red are primary colors, as you can see indicated here. When you combine red and yellow, you get orange. When you combine red and orange, you get this tertiary color, right? So we have primary colors, we have secondary colors, and we have tertiary colors or triadic colors. I'll just stick with tertiary as the word for now. So red is a primary color, orange is a secondary color, which is brought about by the combination of two primary colors, red and yellow, right? And then we have tertiary colors, which is brought about by the combination of a primary color and a secondary color, right? So when you combine red and orange, you get this thing called here. I'm not good with names of colors, but I guess you guys can see my screen, so you know what the color looks like, right? So yellow and orange, when you combine it, you get something like this. Green and yellow, when you combine, you get something like this. Green and blue, when you combine, you get something like a teal. Yeah, and when you combine blue and purple, you get something like this. And when you combine purple and red, you get something like this. So these are red, yellow, and blue are what primary colors. Green, orange, purple here are secondary colors, and all of these other colors that sit in between all of those named colors are what are tertiary or triadic colors. All right, so going ahead, we see that how do you even intend to start using something like this? We intend to start when we want to use this. You see this indication where you see complementary, complementary, complementary. What it just says is many times Combining, the way you get beautiful combinations is by combining colors that live on the opposite sides of the color wheel. For instance, you want to combine blue and orange together. One reason you want to do that is for something called contrast, which is something we'll come to talk about in a few moments from now. So when you combine blue and orange together, they go very well in, hand in hand. When you go with yellow and purple, they look very beautiful together. When you go with green and red, or green and any of the colors on the opposite side, I hope you guys understand what I mean by the opposite sides of a color. So when you see green, you see that the one directly, opposite it is like red, or this or this. Any one of those colors can go with green. But when you begin to think of the combination between blue and this color beside it, you tend to see that the contrast is not defined as much as is necessary. And so the design you come up with maybe begins to look hideous, which I will demonstrate, very very shortly. Right, there are places for things like that, for combinations that of colors that sit side by side. Sorry, let me just say also that this conversation, this talk is going to be a lot of talk, and I hope it doesn't bore you out. But the whole idea of what we're trying to do is to develop a mind for design, how to approach it, how you and you see why we have to do this is this. I believe that the greatest things in life are done with intention, and what that means is every decision we take in life, there's a level of intentionality to it. As an example, let's look at even something as simple as or as complex as our bodies. For instance, you can account for the necessity or the intentionality behind every element that makes up our body. You can tell what the eyes are there for. You can tell what the nose is there for. You can tell what the mouth is there for. You can tell what many things are there for. And so to stress this point, maybe I want to just talk about one very, very small experience I had when I was in secondary school. So when I was in secondary school, I had never really given serious thought to what our eyebrows are here for. I just always thought that it was just a minor feature in our face. And so I had this friend who really had lovely eyebrows, right? This was in JSS3 or something like that. Had lovely eyebrows. And I was like, oh, okay. That I really like to have this measure of, like, I wanted my eyebrows to be that much, right? I did not know what it was there for, but at least something I could see was that it probably made our faces more beautiful. And that was probably the only thing I thought about it. And so I decided to do something. I was like, okay, I'd heard something that, okay, when you scrape up any hair in part of your body, it tends to grow out more. So I felt like, you know what, let me just scrape this so that maybe I can have a chance to develop the kind of beautiful eyebrows that my friend had. And so I decided to scrape it. And that week turned out to be one of the most terrible, weeks of my life. And I would come to explain what that means. And so when I cut it off, I used to play ball a lot in school. And so when I go to play ball, I sweat a lot. And when I sweat a lot, and when you sweat a lot, I then began to notice what problem one of the other problems that these eyebrows were solving beyond just beauty. And so when I scraped it off and I was sweating, I would realize that then sweat would drip across my eyes and go directly into my eyes, and it will hurt so much because if anyone here has tried salt and water into getting into your eyes, you know how hurtful that can be. And so it was really, really, it was a very terrible experience for me because almost every day, so I had to either stay away from sweating. I think at some point I bought an Anki and I had to hold it across my face to just prevent sweat from going through. And so I came to learn the very hard way the intention behind, of one of the intentions behind this. So what am I stressing? I'm stressing that everything in life is done with intention. If we are believers of God here, we know that there's a creator that created all of these things, and there was an intention in mind. Even us as people, many times when we choose to solve problems, the idea of creating solutions is that there's a problem that necessitates the need for that solution. So I'm just trying to draw our attention to the fact that I want us to begin to approach design with a lot of intention. We're not just dragging colors without having it in mind. If you ask a number of people who do designs, maybe full time, who are just that's all they do, they begin to tell you all the ideas and all the thoughts that come together in that design. As an example, we've probably all seen this design that was done by someone. And so when you look at it, we can begin to break down why did some certain decisions were taken, why things were placed in a certain way, why there's goodness. Sometimes you may just look at design and say, okay, the design is nice, is lovely, but might not be able to account for what makes the design nice. So part of what we'll be talking about in this class is what even makes a design nice. What can we identify the elements on a design? of one of which is color that we are talking about at the moment. Can we identify the different, elements or principles that come together in a design in such a way that it makes a design appeal to us or not appeal to us? And so that's a lot of what we'll be talking about. So talking about these primary colors, or sorry, this color wheel, we're saying that when you combine blue and orange, it can lead, you can actually get a very beautiful design by just combining things on opposite side of the color spectrum. All right, so I think I just want to make a demonstration for that. Or before I make a demonstration, I just want us to know that, somehow when you approach colors, there's an art and a scientific way, there's an artistic and a scientific way to approach it. I'm sure that when we come across colors, some colors just evoke certain emotions in us, right? Some colors evoke certain emotions in us. So just to test and just see if we are following. When we hear, oh, lovely gradient to begin. Thank you so much, Caroline. Yeah, spot on observation, which is something that we'll also be talking about, how to observe designs. All right, so I wanted to just ask quickly. So when certain colors come to mind, or when you see certain colors, what comes to mind as an example? When you see a color red, can anyone make an attempt as to what comes to mind when you see the color red in a design or anything? Danger, thank you very much. Danger, wow, danger is love. Thank you, Ademo. You are looks like someone that is so interested in love. Passion, strength, yeah. Thank you so much. That's lovely, very lovely contributions. When you see red, you see passion, you see urgency, you see danger, you see love. And so, when you see blue, can anyone help us know what comes to mind when you see blue? What comes to mind when you see blue? Just type it in the chat and just following. When you see blue, what comes to mind? The color blue. Sadness, sea, sky. Thank you, water. Okay, maybe we should talk more about emotions. Thank you, relaxation. It puts you in a relaxing mood. So, okay, this is what I want us to do. Yes, when you see those colors, they call attention to something, or something comes to your mind. But I want us to particularly associate them with emotions, like emotions. For instance, when we said love, the danger, the feeling of danger, you just feeling, that feeling danger is an emotion, or you feeling love is an emotion. So I want us to use that, attach the colors to emotions. Thank you very much. Strength, the feeling of strength, feeling of calm. Thank you. Royalty. Thank you so much. So yeah, these are very beautiful contributions. When you see the color green, what comes to mind? When you see the color green, what comes to mind? Can anyone help us with that quickly? Can anyone help us with that? Wow, envy. Okay, I have some things to learn. Life. Thank you, Samson. Nature. Okay, agriculture. Progress. Thank you. Nature. Stillness. Thank you so much. And when you see the color yellow, this is probably the last color we do. I just want to make sure that we are following. So thank you. Fruitfulness for green. Yeah. When you see the color yellow, what comes to mind? Jealousy. Wow. I've never associated it, but I'm still learning also. So hot warm. Okay. Okay. Ready. Okay. Thank you so much. Ready. Okay. Traffic light. Thank you. All right. So thank you. Lively, sunny, outgoing. Thank you so much. I like that we are all leaving all these contributions, because it tells that, this now begins to help us understand that. So when we are working on a flyer or any design, we have to know enough of what that design, or the audience that design is going to be, sent forward to, for us to know what the design should begin to entail. For instance, when we know we are probably designing something, maybe Valentine, everyone currently already knows what comes to mind. You just think of red, you think of white, right? When you think of Christmas, we have colors that already come readily to mind. So all these things inform design. So when you begin to work from an empty canvas, and I'm sure maybe, okay, just for those of us who may not know what a canvas is, a canvas is just that empty screen. If you are familiar with how artists draw this, the what is it called, that area where they draw, that they have on a stand, that empty space where they have to start painting on, is called a canvas. And so that actually is why the name of the product that we are talking about here is Canva. It comes from that understanding that it's just like an artist, a space for an artist to express himself in colors, in lines, in shapes, and in whatever needs to be done to get a design out. Right. Oh yeah. So talking about sorry, talking about intentionality using colors, is the idea that what you are designing decides, informs the color that you want to do. As an example, when if you're asked to design something for Airtel, for the brand called Airtel, can anyone just say what color is more likely to be thought of when you're building that, when you're designing something for Airtel? Thank you so much. Red is what comes to mind. When you're doing for MTN, what comes to mind is yellow, right? Is yellow, and maybe a little blue, because they have, a play of that. Thank you so much. Yellow is what you see. So when you are designing for things like that, you begin to know First of all, so now we've talked about two things. One, the emotions you are trying to evoke in the design. And two, we're also talking about the brand you are probably designing for. When you want to design for children, probably you're going to play around with a lot of colors because children are drawn to colorful schemes, right? Color schemes, right? So you see that what you are designing informs. So, and we are still talking about colors. Now, as you go on, you see how this cuts across lots of other layers or elements that come into a design, right? Just for color, now we've gone into talking about, the emotions they evoke. And this is something that I've experienced firsthand. I think I used to stay somewhere some years ago, and the room was I used to stay in was painted in a certain color. And I don't know, I always felt somehow in that room. I don't know how I can express what feeling I, but I was just not always cool. Something was just around in that air. There was just an aura around the room. And someone came in and was like, I think you just changed the color of the walls. And it felt like, what was that? What kind of, it felt so minor, it felt so trivial. So I trivialized the idea of trying to change the room. But I was like, you know what, let's even give it a try. Let's even change the color. And we changed it to another color. I think the color we changed it was blue. And I suddenly started noticing that, oh wow, the emotion, what I felt in that space kind of changed. And so I think I started paying particular attention to, how colors affect our human psychology. And so why am I saying this? Why am I stressing on this point that we choose colors with a lot of reasons? We don't just choose colors because I love red and so I choose red. No, that's not it. Now, as designers, I would say as artists, one of the things we have to figure out when we design is to figure out the meeting point between your understanding of design field, and your understanding of your audience. You need to begin to bring those two things together, meet somewhere in the middle where you don't sacrifice the understanding you have of people, the understanding you have of colors, the understanding you have of all these elements that make up a design. You have to bring it face to face with the audience you are designing for. You don't just say, okay, pink is my best color, and so I'm just going to throw a lot of pink in there. That's not how you do it. You do it with a lot of understanding of what you are really designing for. All right, so going from there, I just want to quickly do a, what's it called, a demo here. Now let's choose a color. For instance, we choose white. And so yeah, I know white is not there. Okay, you know what, maybe let's see if we can even just change the color. And so I should give a disclaimer that what's it called, Canva is not necessarily the tool I use for design, but I can use it for the can use it in the meantime for you guys to understand what I'm saying. So say I have this background, for instance, and I have to use this background, taken from maybe the color wheel. If we are looking at green, then we'll be looking at, then also let me point out that there are also things called neutral colors, and I'm sure some of us already know what that is. Black, white, gray, every color between black and white, like in the neutral spectrum, gray, beige, all of those colors are neutral colors. Most times, most likely, we'll be dealing with gray, black, or white in this, just to keep things very simple. And so, green, for instance, if I have to put a text on this, one thing I have to start thinking about is what text can sit very well on this in such a way that I can see it. These people have given me a very beautiful black. And so let's just say, what can I write? What can I write? What can I write? Colors. Let me just write colors. And so let me increase the font of this and see what we can get out of this. So now this looks very nice. Wow, because there's contrast between the two colors. Yeah, so let's do something now. Let's, instead of doing this, let's change the color to something like this. What do you guys think about these colors? Pay attention to the fact that this color is really between, it's still in the green spectrum. So it's between any one of these greens. And so we begin to see that we lose contrast here. And so our audience might start to squint their eyes to understand or to see what we've written. Thank you. Contrast doesn't fit. Perfect. You can barely see it. So these are the things we have to. So we don't just choose colors for choosing colors. Yes, we can begin to experiment and say, okay, you know what? Let's just try a number of. There's a measure of green that might still work and can still have that contrast. You see around this area, we can still have that. Maybe the contrast is not sufficient. So we can keep going and testing. And one of the things I would always encourage us to do is to always try out different things. See that even this even works perfectly. Let's look at our color wheel. Let's see green. Let's try something around the red spectrum. I'm sure we probably already know how to find our way around this. So we can find red in this area. You can see that red love works pretty well with this. It gives us some beautiful contrast and helps us to see what we are writing. And so this is how you begin to use colors. You begin to use contrast to show difference between things, that elements of your design. So that's where contrast comes in, right? So that's where you begin to use colors, right? So that's about using contrast. So but there's also a way to actually use colors that sit side by side on the spectrum. Is there anyone who can tell me cases where you can need to use colors that can stay side by side. Let me delete that. Can anyone make an attempt as to how you think we can combine colors that stay side by side in the spectrum? Is there a way we can combine two shades of green that make sense in a design, or two shades of yellow? Is there a way you can combine it? Okay, I don't think I'm seeing anything. Maybe I should say quickly at this point that one of the ways you can begin to do it is to play around with gradients, right? You can begin to play around. There's even a lovely gradient here, as you can see. Yeah, so you can see this gradient here. And so you can see that this green, so this is how you begin to think about it, right? If you choose to want to use two colors that are side by side, you just want to put some interest. And if you can notice, it already elevates the way the design feels. We can choose one color that just sits, on one side, just one solid color, right? But or you can just choose something that has a gradient, and it begins to change the way we feel about it. So these are ways you can combine colors that stay side by side. You can take blue, for example. For instance, we can take another shade of blue and say we want to play around with it. Let's see. So instead of using this, let's see if we can use, let's see a color that we can use. Exactly, you can see that it's already changing it. That's something beautiful about gradients, right? You can see that it's changing the warmth of the entire design. So I want you to begin to think experimentation a lot when you're doing designs, right? So you see that the truth is, it's by experiments that I actually came to find out that you can actually combine elements that sit side by side. When I studied the color wheel, most of the recommendations that I got was just always combining opposites. But by the time I started playing around with gradients, I saw that a beautiful way you can combine stuff that stay side by side in the color wheel is by using them in gradients. There are other ways you can actually use them, but I just want to keep things very simple now, that you can use gradients to begin to bring things side by side, to make things make sense. It can be subtle gradients, so it can be very, very stark difference. This is also a lovely gradient, right? By the way, right? So that's about colors. So I just want us to say, whenever we want to choose colors for a design, I want us to just think deeply a lot about what are we trying to design, what colors work perfectly for this design I'm trying to create, right? You can even start from a, what's it called? You can even start from a template. But the truth is, you can like a template a lot and say that, oh, there's a lot of beauty in this template, and I want to use it for the thing I want to use it for. But now the one way you get creative is, okay, knowing the things to take out in that template, or knowing the things to change in that template. It gets you more creative while you're using even templates that you find in Canva, because now you can even use it more efficiently, because you're doing it with an intention, you're doing it with understanding. You're not just doing it and just saying, okay, I like this design, let's just change this. Maybe let's even maybe look at something. Maybe you say, okay, I want to do something for MTN. I really like this. I don't want to choose this because it already has something that has to be. Imagine you like this for MTN and just say, you know what, let me use something like this for MTN. This may not just work because there's nothing that screams MTN. You might think you might just slap the MTN logo here, and that might work a bit, but maybe MTN might not like that. It doesn't, speak the language of their brand as much as they want it to, speak it. And so you might like this, but you might begin to tell yourself, you know what, how can I maybe begin to change the way this looks so that it even has that MTN feel? Maybe something we can do that is coming to mind is to try something. I don't know if you guys have played around with opacity and this thing before. Let's try something. Let's, instead of using this, let's use something more yellowish. If I wanted to get more, what's it called, I would have gone to pick out the MTN's exact color code, but I don't want to complicate things. So let's look at this, for instance. This already changes it, but maybe this is not enough. Maybe we can now play with some opacity to maybe put some yellow effect. This is not sufficient actually, but we can just keep going such that what is behind, you can see some of those elements. If you can't see, let me zoom into it. So you can begin to see that, okay, I've changed the feel of the image. Maybe this is how it was before, but by adding some yellow to it, it gives some more yellow effect to the image while still retaining what is in the background. So why did I have to show this? I have to show this because now we are taking a template that we already know, a template that exists, and trying to make it with an intention in mind. I'm designing it for a brand, and so I want to begin to make sure that the element or the things that this brand identity doesn't get lost in my own preference design, if you know what I mean. Maybe something else I would want to change is the font, because MTN does have a brand font, an official brand font, but we'll come to fonts later. So I just hope we understand how to use colors that are opposite, how we use colors that are opposite. We use colors that are opposite to achieve contrast, and we use colors that are side by side to achieve interest, especially when we're working with gradients. Please confirm to me if you understand what I have just said. If one is lighter than the other, maybe make one more transparent than the other. Okay. Okay, I'm seeing very interesting contributions. I don't know what you mean by if one is lighter than the other. Maybe I can address it maybe after the class and we have what's it called?
Okay, that was when you asked about when in what circumstance can we use these two different shades of a color or something. So that was the response they were giving. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Lovely, lovely, lovely attempt, actually. Yeah. So, like I said, you see, something about design that I think we want to have in the back of our mind. As much as it has all of these guidelines that help us come up with better designs, one thing we should always have in mind is our eyes. Our trained eyes, and I'll come to why I say trained eyes are, usually better judges of designs, right? And how do you train your eyes? By observing as much designs and analyzing as much designs as possible. When you do that a lot, you train your design mind. It's like an exercise, like going to the gym, but instead of carrying dumbbells and lifting weights, it's like you are exposing your eyes to lots of different kinds of designs, and having a conversation with those designs. And what I mean by that is looking at those designs, looking at the elements that have come together, and begin to make a justification for everything. Why did they choose this color? Why was this font used? Why was this used? Why does this spacing exist here? The more you do that, the more you exercise your design, the mind of your design, right? Your design mind. And so the more you do that, you train your eyes to be able to observe beauty in design in such a way that you can actually combine almost. See, one of the things I realized as I went by in my design journey is to realize that while there were hard and fast rules, there was really no so strict rule. Yes, there are lots of rules. They will tell you don't use 6 colors, don't use more than 3 colors. And that is a very beautiful guideline, especially when you don't have as much time to experiment with your design as possible. They will always say keep it to 3 colors, right? And that is a very beautiful recommendation. Just that as time goes by, then you begin to realize how you can even combine more, like 12 colors in a design in a way that it doesn't clutter your design, and it doesn't make your design look less, what's it called, less beautiful, if you know what I mean, right? So the truth is, all these things I'm saying, they are really just guidelines, things that help you to begin to know how design works. And as you strengthen your muscle, your design muscle, what you begin to do is you begin to even know, and experiment even beyond borders. And see, one thing I should talk about, the beauty of experimentation, is the fact that many things in life, right, only advance, most times advance, because of humans who are ready to experiment with the things that they've gotten used to. Let's think of food as an example. At some point, maybe someone just thought of just boiling rice, and just boiling rice and eating it in that state. Someone else decided, what, let's put salt in this rice. And by those layers of experimentation, then we got to start making stuff like jollof rice and stuff like fried rice. What am I saying? In essence, experimentation is beautiful, and this is something that like design helps you to do a lot of. Now you can stick to all of these things. Like I said, they are guidelines. I think of them more as guidelines than as rules, right? They just guide you, they just help you, make sense of your design. That if you don't have that much time to explore and express yourself in design, just having these things at the back of your mind, you can maybe begin to make sense of your design and make designs that make sense. All right, I hope that clears out a few things. So now I want to talk about how to determine a good design. And two things I'll be talking about under this would be understanding the basic elements of design and understanding the principles of design. And so, what are basic elements of design? These are things that we already know. Things like lines are basic elements of designs, right? Things like line is a basic element of design. See how just introducing, I don't know about you, but see how just introducing a line into this design changes the way this design works. Some people might feel like, okay, this doesn't work, but maybe something I can also do is to reduce the transparency, just to add something to it. Something else I can also do is to maybe duplicate that line and maybe rotate it a bit somehow. Just introduce interest in the design. Something I can do is to maybe make it rhyme with the line of this Y, just to increase interest in the design, right? That's something I can do. I can even bring it across the image just to change the way design is. So this is how you can just take lines. And so why am I mentioning these elements? I mention these elements so that we can be very aware of all the elements that come into a design. So when you look at a design, maybe like something like this, you can already begin to see something like lines. If you cannot, let me zoom in and see that these lines that are like across this, that these dotted lines that are there. So These are elements that really just make up almost all the designs you come across. If you look at the bottom part of this design, you maybe see a couple of lines there that just add some little interest to the design. So lines are one of the things that you find in designs that are considered one element of design. Something else you see there is shapes as well. Can we say what shapes we see in this place? I'm going to move to the or if we have the design on our phones, we can just open it up and begin to identify the shapes you can see in this flyer design. You can just drop it on the what's it called? Let's drop it in the chat. What shapes do you see there in that design? Thank you. Square. You see square. You see circles. What else do you see? What else can we see? I think that's probably all the shapes we can see there. So thank you very much. You see square. You see circles. You see rectangle, right? You see rectangle. I can see a rectangle somewhere, a rounded rectangle to be precise. Rhombus and circles. You just want, anyways. Rhombus. Thank you so much, Samuel Ademuyiwa. But yeah, so you see rhombus, you see circles. I'm not that good with shapes. So he said no circles. Are you sure there's no circles? I can see this is a circle, even if it constitutes the logo. I can see that circle there. I'm talking about every single thing you can see in the design, actually. Even this line around here is also a circle, right? It's also a circle, right? So you can actually see a couple of circles. You can see a rectangle here. So shapes are also one element of the design of a design, right? And you see, like we've added this line to it. Let me delete the line and maybe we should try something else. Something else we can throw in is a shape, and I think you can find shapes somewhere here. And so let's put something like this. Let's see how this can, maybe change the way we sorry. Maybe say this how we can change. Let me just send this backward. We should just send it to the back. Okay, awesome. You can see how this shape, just adding this shape, just changes the way this section looks, right? So shapes are also one great thing. And so again, why am I saying these things? Imagine that you have an empty page here. Imagine you have an empty page and you want to just start from scratch. You need to know all these elements that can possibly come together to begin to make up your design. If you do not know those elements, as an example, we write and we speak, we chat every day, and all of these things, they are elements that make up all these things that we do. We need to know letters, we need to know words, maybe stuff like morphemes, we need to know idioms, we need to know how to use white spaces or space in our text, we need to know how to use full stops. Those things are elements that make us. So when we want to write, we begin to think of how these elements should come together in order to make our writing make sense, right? I hope you're understanding. So okay, barcode, thank you. Barcode consists of a number of boxes, right? A number of boxes. And I will just talk about something quickly before I go into detail. These are just a lot of squares, and there are lots of negative spaces. I'll come to explain what negative spacing means, or negative white space. Let's just keep that as simple as that. But yeah, thank you for observing this. So we have lots of squares, a lot of squares actually in this place, and you can actually see some as rectangles. But thank you so much for actually observing that, for spotting that. Right. So going back to this, so why am I mentioning the elements? We just need to know that okay, when the same way we approach writing or speaking is the same way we approach design. Everything in life really has elements that make them up, right? Has elements that make them up, right? And so we just need to know enough of this, because if you are given a free canvas, an empty canvas to start with, I need to know that lines exist to be able to know that okay, I can throw in a line there. I need to know that different shapes exist that I can begin to make sense of in my design, right? And so that's why I'm actually mentioning all these elements. So we have talked about lines, we have talked about shapes, and we have 2D and 3D shapes, right? We have 2D and 3D shapes. This is a 2D shape, it's just two-dimensional. We have 3D shapes. I don't think I can find many of them here, but yeah, let's just stick it to be simple. 3D shapes are things like cubes, things like cylinders, right? I know we may not be able to think of how to use cylinders in our design, and I don't want to go into detail of that, but yeah, there are many ways. And see, again, I would also stress and make emphasis on the idea of experimentation. As ideas come to your mind, Canva is a very beautiful place to come to try out ideas that come to your mind. If you think, oh, maybe you're just laying on your bed and you just think, you know what, how can I actually make a cylinder, a design that has a cylinder in it, and make sense out of it? And you just open Canva and just say, you know what, let me get a cylinder from somewhere and just put it there and see how I can make sense of a cylinder. Hopefully, if we have time, I may be able to show how we can make cylinder make sense in our designs. But let's just say that we need to just be aware of the fact that we have shapes, whether 2D or 3D shapes. We have lines to play around with. Something we also have is typography. And what is typography? Typography, without getting into so much detail, typography just means text. Really, it just means text. Let me just keep it as simple as that. There are lots of things about typography, but typography is about text, it's about font, right? It's about line spacing, it's about letter spacing. Typography is just how text is rendered on your screen, how text is rendered on your screen. And so, thank God I chose this design, because I can see something I want to talk about is already exists in this design. All right, so typography just speaks a lot about text. So how do you manage text? There's hardly any design you come across, hardly any design you come across that you will not find text in it. So yes, it is a very valid and very present element of design. So we've talked about lines, we've talked about shapes, be it 2D or 3D, and now we're talking about typography. And so typography just means font. All this text that we have in our designs is what makes up typography. If you can see, how many of you can observe how many different fonts you can see in this place? How many different fonts you can see? Yeah, let me quickly see if anyone can. How many fonts? 4 fonts. Okay, thank you very much. 4 fonts. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Who else can see less or more? Four. Thank you so much. So we can rightly observe that we have this. We have this one that was used to write B. We have this one that was used to write U. We have one that was used to write this, and we have one that was used to write. Okay, so as I can see here, it looks like we have 3 fonts, and I will not confuse you. This is how we know. And truthfully speaking, it's good that you observed 4, because I'm the one that has access to what I'm seeing. That's why I can identify that there are 3 fonts. If you can already see, when I select this font, it's just the way it is rendered that makes it look different. But this is like 3 fonts. These are like 3 fonts. This is 1 font. This is 2 fonts. And this font and this font are actually the same, because when you look at this place, you can see it is Lexent Deca, right? And when you select this as well, it is still Lexent Deca. But when you change to this, you see we have this name there. I'm not good with French, so let me not disgrace myself. So this is U, and so this is B. This is another font. And so one of the things I want to talk about here is different font families or different font types, font face types, right? And so one I'll mention is something called serif. Serif, this font is an example of serif. You can already see it in the name here. And what is a serif font? If you zoom in, and I hope you can still see my screen. If you zoom in, you can see all these edges that are attached to, they are called serifs, right? They are chiseled edges, they are called serifs, these things that attach themselves, and there are a lot of them. This is probably like the very first type of font that, was standardized in, design and print, right? You have these things that have this extra something called serifs or chiseled edges. You can contrast that with something like this, right, that does not really have all of this. If you can look at it very well, you can see that this does not have those extra things that this one seems to have. There are lots of serif fonts. So maybe I should come to this place and just quickly make a few text here, and just maybe say let's just say serif. And so let's just choose a couple of serif fonts. Let's come here and say, okay, let's just search for, let's just say, okay, thank you. There's something called serif. So it lists us a list of serif fonts. And so something that you will see common to all of them, let me create a couple of them. Something you will see common to all of them is that they always have these extra edges around them, right? You can see this extra, instead of just stopping the E here, you see this extra thing here. You see this extra thing called serifs, right? You see this extra thing, see the E. See how you see it. So that's how you observe a serif font. And when do you use serif fonts? Serif fonts are usually used for formal prints. You see them in a lot of newspapers. You see them in a lot of formal or official documents. People here, I'm sure a couple of us here that probably even went, that probably are familiar with typesetting and stuff like that. You have seen this font called Times New Roman. Times New Roman is one of the most popular serif fonts that we have in the world, right? And you can see it. Let me see if I can find Times New Roman here. So we'll just use the exact what's it called here? Times New Roman. Let's see. Thank you. We can find Times New Roman. Yeah, you can see that we still have all those sharp edges called chiseled edges or serifs, right? So those are serif fonts. If you can see, it already makes us look like we are trying to create something like an official document. If you can already see it. Something else, that another type of font that we see is something called the sans serif font. Sans serif font. Now, let me, before I proceed, the reason I have to mention this is, for instance, you are creating maybe a flyer for an official company event. One of the safest choice of fonts to choose is among serif fonts, because it has been observed that it appeals a lot to that category of people, right? That's something to keep in mind. And that's why, again, what we're just trying to do here is just developing a mind for design, knowing how to think of design, how to approach designs, such that if a design gig is brought to you, you can begin to say, okay, what kind of event is this? They tell you it's an official event. Okay, you're already making sense of what to use. the kind of colors. I'm sure we also know that there are colors that also work for official events, right? Away from even just the brand colors of the company you're designing for. But yeah, I'm just saying that all of these things just should inform how we make design choices. And so while we are designing, we are thinking of lines, we are thinking of what's it called? We're thinking, I don't like Times New Roman. I also don't like it. So we're on the same page on that. I also don't like Times New Roman. But I mean, we just have to do sometimes what school says we should do. Else you risk what's it called? Your project supervisor or someone giving you lower marks. But away from that, really, I personally also don't like Times New Roman. But again, let me just stress on something. Remember how we said when we're talking about colors that sometimes when we are designing, it's not just about our preferences and what we want. Many times it's about a meeting point between what you know, how much you understand the design world and how much you think your audience. What how will I put it? That the kind of audience you are designing for, there has to be a meeting point, right? There has to be a meeting point. So personally, I don't like times in one, but there are times I've had to use it because it may actually have proven the best way. As a matter of fact, Times in Woman is available on all systems. So if I'm designing if I'm working on a design in Microsoft Word, there's a likely chance that all the systems, all the phones that would access that document will probably have Times New Roman, than many other choice fonts. The idea is I'm designing not just for myself, I'm designing for people, and so they also come into play in my design choices and design decisions. So now I'll go again. We've talked about lines, we've talked about shapes, and currently we're talking about typography, and we've talked about serif fonts. And so I want to choose a sans serif font. I think Canva has a very beautiful default sans font, a sans serif font. I think it's Canva sans, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Canva sans, and this is it. But as you can see the difference, that this one has some extra thing, but this does not have. This is just as simple gets, right? You see the S just stops where it is. There's no extra serif. So this is called a sans serif font, right? This is a serif font. So why do we need to know this now? This is used a lot in modern designs. This is used a lot in very simple designs too. You can see the simplicity of this because it just has only the lines or only the elements that make up that letter. N does not have something extra to it. Yes, there are some sans serif fonts that actually are more interesting, right? But we're not going so much into that. But the idea is generally sans serif fonts usually don't have these extra things. And so from sans serif fonts, we go to script fonts. So script fonts are something like cursive fonts. We know what cursive is, right? I'll just choose one for example. Let me use, I think I know a couple of ones. Is this Tangerine? Yes. Tangerine is one of those kinds of fonts. So Times New Roman. Sorry, let me move the capitalization. Okay, I think this has natural capitalization. So Times New Romans. And so this is also something. For instance, imagine you're doing something for now. Maybe it's what can come to mind. Let me even quickly do this. When you see a font like this, what begins to come to mind? What kind of event do you think you might be designing for? Is the particular keyword I'm looking for. What kind of event comes to mind when you see that kind of font? Because it makes it look elegant. Yes, it makes it look elegant. Yes, it does make it look royal. And but also understanding that even serif fonts in times past were actually used for very royal designs. But yes, you're also right that they also use this for royal events and would maybe do something like that. Thank you for that contribution. Yes, it makes it look elegant. Is there anyone else who can also tell us like what Times New Romans can script fonts can be used for, are used for? Sorry. What comes to mind? Maybe if I type something like this, maybe if I type something like matrimony, maybe that comes to mind. You can begin to see that they use something like this a lot in wedding prints, right? They use something like that a lot in wedding prints. Someone is about typing something. Thank you parties. They use it a lot for parties, for like events, for like fun stuff is where you use this a lot. So again, why are we talking about this? Because we need to know, have justification for all the things that make up a design, right? In the human body, like I've said before, all the things that make up our body have justification for their existence. And so even in designs, I think everything should follow suit. There are choices, there are things you just make. Why did you use this font? Oh, because this is the nature of event I was designing for. And being that's the nature of event, I think this font works very well with it. Right, that's something. So script font. Let me go to there are lots of other fonts, the slab serif, but I do not want to go into all those parts. So we have display or decorative font. Let me just use this as display or decorative fonts. These ones are used for, these ones are probably, they are playful and they are attention grabbing. A lot playful and attention grabbing. Let me see if I can figure some out from here. So something like handwriting, or I think I even saw something like a display. I think that's an interesting one. Ones that you just see someone's that are very playful in the way they look. See this, for instance, is a very playful font. You can see how they played around with the D, with the I, with the S, with the P, with the L, with the A, and with the Y. Very, although this A looks like backward R, but I mean we can make sense of what it means just by looking at it. So these are different kinds of font. This is serif, this is sans serif, this is what script font, and this is what decorative or display font. And you can see this is used for a lot of playful. So if the playfulness is like a value of the event, is part of one of the, maybe you are designing for children parties or for a children event, maybe Children's Day. Let's probably even do something like this. Children's Day. I think someone just dropped a message. Yeah, thank you. Comic Sans for Kids. Thank you very much. Comic Sans work is also a display font, actually. It's also a display or decorative font. Comic Sans work a lot. Let me choose Comic Sans so some of us know what that is. So exactly, this is Comic Sans. See how playful it looks. Children's Day. So it's just one day, not 2 days. No more. Right. So Children's Day. Whoa, Children's Day. I should work on my English. It's Children's Day. Right. So yeah, it's Children's Day. Yeah. So look how playful it is. It's not necessarily like doesn't necessarily have those consistent serifs that a serif font has, and it doesn't have it's not as clean as simple as this is. This is for like fun, to grab attention, so you can use this a lot for stuff like that. So that's how you understand this are fun. So we've talked about lines, we've talked about shapes, we've talked about typography, and typography is really, really broad. Right, with typography is really, really broad, because look at something. I can play around with the spacing of these elements so much that it changes how the thing looks. I can open it up so much. This is called letter spacing, the spacing between all the letters. It is part of typography, right? It can make things look a lot more interesting, a lot more organized. If I just make all these things like this, if this is this what's it called I use, mind you, there are things that this is hand. So this is what I was meaning by negative spacing, for instance. See that it is going lower than, I hope you can all see my screen, and I hope I'm not confusing us. Right. So now we've talked about typography, but now I'm talking about line spacing, letter spacing, the spacing between all the letters that make up the text. Right. So we can see that as we increase the letter spacing, the space increases. This looks very interesting. As we go like this, we see that it cramps up the text and makes it more difficult to read. But I bet you there are a lot of ways to use this negative spacing that makes sense. Let me even tell you an example of someone that uses of a brand that uses negative spacing. FedEx uses something like that, and it creates something very interesting in their logo. So we can see that there's no space between all the letters that make up there's no space that makes up all the letters in this space. I'm sure you can see my screen, right? Please confirm if you can see my screen. If you can see my screen, please confirm. I just want to make sure that we can see this. Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so this is the FedEx logo, right? And so, sorry. And so this is the FedEx logo. You can see that there's almost no space. See that for Comic Sans, it does not work so much because it just makes things look a lot creepy and somehow awkward, right? But see how this works perfectly for FedEx logo. And if you can look between the E and the X, you can see an effect that negative spacing creates. Who can tell me what they can see between the E and the X? And it really adds color and interest into their brand. What can you see in the FedEx logo? Can you someone quickly say an arrow? Thank you so much. An arrow is what you can see. And for the fact that their brand is speaking about shipping and they talk about speed, delivery, progress, it really adds a very colorful and meaningful effect. This is what it means by. So why am I saying this? Because when you are doing design, things have to be intentional. This is probably what the designer was thinking about. And just by virtue of reducing the spacing, just playing around with typography, it just created an effect that would otherwise haven't been created if it just stuck to the normal spacing. Do we understand? So this is just, all of these things are just elements that you find in designs that make designs make sense. We probably may have never even observed that there was an arrow, but thankfully we can see that. But just by having negative space, we see that presence of an arrow. It may not be a detail that many people pay attention to, but if you do, you find it very interesting. So this is how typography can add color to your design, right? And so why, again, sorry that I'm repeating this, but why are we saying this? Because you need to understand a lot of these things to be able to No, see, it improves how much you can experiment. Now, knowing that you can use lines, knowing you can use shapes, knowing you can use colors, knowing you can use typography, you can use serif font, sans serif, script font, decorative or display font, now opens you up to lots of options that you can experiment with. That in your free time, when you're not doing some serious design, you can sit with Canva and just play around with all of these things and put things together. We try this. Oh, let me try negative space on this. Let me see. I don't think I like it. Let me increase the spacing. Okay, I think it looks okay, but I don't think I like it. Okay, you know what? Let me change the font. And this is something I learned very early in design. Like, it helps when you change a number of these things. Just changing font can even elevate the way you feel about your own design. Just changing the way what font you are using just changes the way you feel about design. So all of these things really just come together in different designs that we need to begin to pay a lot of attention to. So let me return this to defaults. All right, so something else you can see, yes, we've talked about color, so that's also an element of design. There are a lot of other elements, but I'm trying to keep things so simple so we can immediately begin to use all of these things. So I've talked about lines, I've talked about shapes, I've talked about typography, I've talked about colors. That's how we started. And you saw how to use colors, how to use contrast in colors, how to use gradients to add color and to add interest in your design. All right, so something else I want to talk about is something called principles of design. Principles of design. um okay, so yes, so one of the principle of design is balance. And so what is balance? See, like everything in life, right? Like everything in life, there is balance. You find balance in everything, whether you observe it consciously or unconsciously. There is always balance in everything. In the human body, there is balance. The way the head sits upon on top of our neck, on the shoulders, and everything, we see balance. And we have especially three types of balance. Thank you, not thank you so much. Like, not making everything in the design big. Everything in the design cannot just be anywhere they are. They cannot take up any size they take, because even in nature, not everything in nature is big. You find the small things, you find the big things, you find different kinds of things in different proportions. If you take the human body, for instance, and you put a line in the middle, you can see an equality between what is on the left and what is on the right. We call that symmetric balance. It is symmetric because it is left side, the what's it called, the elements that make up the left side of the body becomes equal to what is on the right side. That's what we call symmetric balance. We also have asymmetric balance. You see it in many places. Where can I use as an example? That's a very difficult example to give, but if you can look at this screen, for instance, you can see this screen. This was, let me close this out. So you see that, okay, now this makes it symmetrical. Let me open that side up again. So we see, yes. So we can see that things might not necessarily be the same, although when you put a line in the middle, you get symmetric because the left is equal to the right. But there are lots of ways you can do something asymmetrically. Let me use an example in our design. Let me reduce this and actually go just add the power outage. Sorry, I'm in Nigeria. Like, I guess you guys understand. So I'll just use this light in the meantime. All right, so let me come back here. And so let's throw in some text here and use that to maybe explain asymmetric balance. So let's say something like, let's just say love world. Someone leave a message. Nepa has done it again. Yes, Nepa has done it again. So yeah, let's stick to this. Let's use this for example. Let's make this okay. There's no board available for this, so let's do this. For instance, when you look at this, if someone gives you a design like this, somehow, if you really think about it, and so we have to also have a way of feeling designs, actually feeling how a design looks, right? Imagine like you have a stack of textbooks. There's a way we can just be looking at the stack of textbooks, know if it's balanced or not. The same way designs also have things like that. So when you look at this, somehow this feels like it is heavier on the right side than on the left side. If you understand what I just said, you can just signify that this text that is here, the emptiness of the left makes it look like something is heavier on the right side than on the left. If you understand, if I'm not alone in observing this, please just you can just leave a message or just do a reaction. Thank you very much. So like you can observe that something, the absence of any element on the left makes it look imbalanced because this looks like it is weighing on one side and not on the other. Something that can happen with something like this is, let's see if we can throw in an image. Let's see if we can throw in an image. Let's do something like this. Yes. So putting this, for instance, Someone saying something. Okay, thank you so much for the feedback. So putting this, for instance, changes a lot about this. So now it adds some level of balance. And what I mean by asymmetric is this: if you put a line in the middle, the element on the left are not equal to the element on the right, but somehow this still balances out. Right, it still balances it out. One thing I might want to do is reduce it so it doesn't seem like it has higher presence than this level. So imagine that this is it, right? This is what it looks like. And so if you can see that this even looks slightly more balanced than the way it was before. If you even take this off, this also doesn't look balanced. One way this can look balanced is by putting it in the middle, right? So this is where it can look balanced, but putting it back here just, makes it look imbalanced. Do you understand? So this is what balance means. This is a symmetric, right? It is not symmetric in that when you put a line, when you divide it in equal parts, you don't have the same elements on both sides. But when you do it like this, you can see that, okay, the weight on one side kind of balances out. One side is no more empty than the other. So this is what balance is. So good designs really have balance. You find balance in everything, in all the elements that make up a design. Right. All right. So talking about that's it about one principle of design. So that's balance. It makes sure it ensures stability and structure in the layout. Another thing we'll talk about is contrast. Contrast is something we already know about, right? Contrast is something we already know about. Contrast is even what immediately shows up here. Because if I take this and I change the color of this, or let me change the color to this, it loses contrast such that you'll be like, imagine you design something like this and you're telling someone, oh, can you read the text that is by the side? And someone is saying there's no text there. I say, no, there's text there. Look at it very well now. There's a text there. It seems funny because you're like, I cannot see anything, but you're insisting that there's a text here. Imagine that we have something as little as this. I have a text here. It is slightly pink, right? But I don't think many people on this call will be able to see it. Imagine that you just keep this like this. This does not necessarily make for a beautiful design. Albeit, there is a way that this can actually make sense. And see again, keep emphasizing on the reason we are actually talking about these things. The reason we are talking about these things is to know enough of these elements to begin to play around with all of them. When you begin to know how you can play around, we've talked about negative space, we've talked about increasing the letter spacing, we've talked about changing the font, we've talked about introducing lines, shapes, and things like that. So when you're in a design, you're working on a design, what this helps is, I'm sure perhaps a couple of us know something called creative block, right? Creative block. Creative block is, let me just type what it is. Creative block is maybe when you are trying to do a design and you are lacking in inspiration. You just run out of inspiration. You're just stuck somewhere, right? So creative block. One way that helps is knowing enough of all these elements and principles to begin to play around with the element and begin to try to have a feel for the design and find out one that makes sense. So creative block is like a point in your in your design experience. Yes, when you have no ideas, thank you, to design or create. Thank you, as art block or writer's block. Thank you so much. Many people go through this, whether it's a writer, you just are lacking in inspiration. So something that helps, apart from taking a break from a design, one thing that helps is that you have all these elements. You can say, okay, you know what, let me play around with maybe some of these elements, maybe throw in some lines in this design or some shapes into this design. Or you know what, let me change the color. There's a way we can actually change the color of the background in this design that just changes the way we feel about the design. I'm hoping that we're going to have the time. Oh, I think I'm already past the time. So sorry. So like I hope that we'll be able to. I don't think we'll be able to play around with this. But if you can in your personal place, try to take a design, lay out all your elements, and play around with the colors. Just change a color from red to blue. Say, okay, you know what? Let me use very funny colors. Combine brown and green. Say, okay, let me see what comes of that, and just keep trying things out and see how you can stumble on things and stumble on newer ideas or ideas that become original to your own artistic expression, right? So going back, right? So contrast is something that we use. Like I said before, this is something that we can actually use. I hope we can be able to, okay, let me see if we can use it here. Let me see if we can use something like that in this kind of place. Contrast, something like this kind of contrast. Let me not go forward too forward. Let me be able to touch all the principles of design that I have here. So contrast is one element or principle that you find in design, is how you show interactivity or interactions between different elements that make up your design. You can use poor contrast to your advantage, and you can use very strong contrast. to your advantage. Anything can be used to your advantage. The more important thing is you understand those principles enough to know how to play around them in your design. All right. Again, I would say when you work with templates too, these are also ways you can begin to change the way things look in your design. Right. All right. So let's go to something called hierarchy, visual hierarchy. This is very interesting because there's no design you are working on that you don't even have and that you would not have an understanding of what the most important elements are. Right, you always have you see, in every design you see, you would always find that some elements you have to talk about, some elements that should have more presence than other elements. Let's look at this design. If the background is dark, the light contrast will work. Thank you so much. Yes, that will work perfectly again, but that still means that we are using contrast on opposite sides of the spectrum. I want to try to show, if you know what watermark means, watermark is one way you can use poor contrast to achieve interest in your design. Watermark just sits there. You can even use it in backgrounds, right? You just have it there in your background. Poor contrast can also be put to use to advantageous use in your designs, right? So that is something. But thank you for this too. If you change the design, I think we can just even play around with that. If you just change this background again, I'll say I'm not so good with Canva, so I'll just do it in the most basic way I can, just to emphasize. The whole idea here is really to just show you what I'm talking about. Okay, let me see. Okay, is there where I can? Oh, I should not waste too much time on this. But the whole idea, let me not waste too much time on this. Yes, it seem like I don't know what to do from here. Forgive me. Okay, awesome. This layer, let me send to back. Okay, so it means that poor contrast I used can work here, can work here. Let me start from here and just play around with this. So see the contrast that I used, the color I used before was something around here, and it can work here very well when you change the background. But sometimes you don't want to change the background. Sometimes you just want to use that same thing, but you want to use it in a different kind of way, right? Something you can use it if you know what watermarks are. You use watermarks. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm not so used to it. I use other apps, but yeah, that's it, man. Right, so let's talk about visual hierarchies, what we're talking about. Now, look at this design. Every design should always have something that stands out. So if you look at this design, can you begin to tell me the elements that stand out, or maybe the first element or first thing you see that shows up in this place? The first thing that shows up in the design, that when you see the design, it just quickly grabs your attention. Can you tell me what you see first? Can you leave it in the comments? The Canva logo with its colors, beautiful. Free, thank you so much. I think you can also see 1 week. Thank you so much. Beautiful. I like that the three people who responded with those three things that are probably the most important things in the design. So someone, you can see Canva, because it really stands out. It uses contrast. If you can notice, it's very different from the background. It uses contrast to add that effect, to add presence to the design. 1 week uses typography. It uses font size in its own to add visual hierarchy. And what does free use? It uses color. So one uses typography, it uses font size. One uses color. Okay, the two use color, but this also uses font. It changes the font to something more cursive, right? Something more cursive, a script font to add effect, visual hierarchy. So usually your eyes will probably move from 1 week. Your eyes will capture 1 week, will capture free, will capture Canva. And one of the things we look at when you are designing it is, okay, if your audience have just 1 second to just look at your design, can they immediately capture the most important element in the design? So when one person sees 1 week, I see 1 week, I see free, I see Canva. Okay, and tries to make sense out of it. Yes, it might not make so much sense, but 1 week free Canva might just mean that, okay, they want to give us free pro subscription that works for 1 week. Well, that works. But the whole point is that this helps you guide your user's eye, the audience eyes. So that's what visual hierarchy means. It guides your viewers' eyes. You are trying to organize elements in order of importance. And so you are trying to have the user, try to take the user through the way you want the user to see the design, how the user should read the design. So the user starts from your 1 week free, this captures Canva on graphic design using Canva, then maybe goes ahead. There's a way we can arrange all this in a way that it confuses the user, and the user would almost not be able to make sense of what you are trying to say. Imagine that we just put this free around this present free 1 week. Yes, it works, right? It works in different ways. But imagine that we just structure it in such a way that it just makes you, it just loses, thank you, Nepa has done it again. So it just makes you it just takes your eye, the viewer's eyes, through a journey of how you want the user to understand the design. So visual hierarchy is when you, and this is also something that is present as well, is also present as well, because you want to encourage people to you want to encourage people to what's it called, you want to encourage people to register as quickly as possible. So this needs to also be a present element. But one week grabs you and it uses typography, this grabs your attention and it uses color contrast, and this grabs you because it's just very different. It uses elements that are different from the rest of the design. If you know enough about design, you will realize that while everything in the design is flat, this does not use a flat expression. It doesn't use a flat design. Actually, you can see bevel. Maybe because someone set up Nepa. Nepa decided to disappoint me. But thank you so much. All right. So this uses a different style of design. Everything in this design is flat. But for here, you can see a gloss effect that Canva uses. So it uses all of those elements to make your design make sense and just to guide your viewer's eye to how you want them to approach your design. So that is visual hierarchy. It is used a lot. It is used a lot in design. For instance, you do something like this. Now, love word, this and this captures your user's attention. So if you want to do something else, something you can use a smaller font. You can use a smaller font to maybe, and you see, we don't expect, like someone said before, you don't expect everything in your design to everything should just be big. If everything is big, then you are losing out on hierarchy. You would not allow your teacher, so you don't allow your users, the audience, your viewers, the ability to what's the word? You don't guide them through the journey in your design. Every design actually has a journey through which you want to take the user. But like when you do it, if everything is big in the world, then maybe many things would make so much sense. But the beauty of the small is that the big exists. The beauty of the big is that the small exists. We're not in a philosophy class, but I hope some of us understand what that means. So the whole idea is all these elements, you just help your users to understand. One thing we can do to this, if we want to keep this legible, one thing we can also do is to reduce the color in this place in such a way that it reduces its presence, and so it makes it compete less with the other elements that are in your design. So in that way, by just using color, we can already still achieve visual hierarchy. The positioning of this love word means that your eyes go directly to the center of the screen, captures this before it goes down to your paragraph text and maybe to other elements that would be in your design, right? So that's the whole idea, is that you use the elements to achieve, so let me also just do a recap here. We've talked about elements of design. Elements of design are just these different small things that come together in design. Principles of design is how those basic elements of design, how you bring them together, how you bring the lines and the shapes together, how you bring the text, the fonts, the font sizes, the line spacing, the letter spacing, everything together, and the colors together. Do we understand? So that's how. So principles of design are just the way you think about how you harmonize the elements that make up a design. That when you throw a line on a design, you throw a shape, you throw a text. Principle of design is what guides how you arrange the elements in the design. So I hope that explains it. Something else we want to talk about is alignment. And so alignment is something very interesting. I can do something like this, and I can do something like this. Then I can come and do this. Somehow, this design just offends my eyes somehow, and some of us, it may offend us, because you just see how every element don't agree in the way they are aligned. Or let me just make it even worse. Let's put it here. This is neither at the middle nor at the left nor at the right. It's just there. This is also the same. This is also more to the left. Let's say this is probably the most organized text here. But if you look at it, this design looks very scattered. So alignment is how all the elements in your design, how you arrange them in a way that lines up along common edges or centers. What does this mean? If I bring this to this place, and something that Canva does very beautifully is that it helps us know when elements, and it helps us use this to decide when things are aligning. So when you do this, you now begin to see that there's a common angle to it, that is a common thing to it. We can either do this, make it left aligned, we can make it center aligned, right? You can make the center aligned. And as we can see, love word is not so aligned. So we have to probably exactly do something like this. And they help us with this very beautiful thing, this beautiful line when things are approaching the center or when things are at the center. So this is something, this is center alignment, right? So we can see that everything has an agreement along its center, both on the vertical axis and on the horizontal axis. So we can see more on the vertical, actually it's more vertical. So we can say that this in a way agrees, they agree than the way it was before, than putting it like this. So alignment is about how you arrange all the elements in your design in a way that lines up along common edges. It can be on the left, it can be on the right, it can be at this along the center. I hope you understand this. So that's alignment. So repetition is something very interesting. You can see it in this design. This the way this stuff works, this thing at the background, the way it happens is it uses some form of repetition, right? It uses some form of repetition. Actually, even the colors use repetition. What does repetition really mean? It just means reusing design elements, whether colors or shapes or fonts. What it helps to do is to reinforce a unified look and improves recognition. And maybe one funny example, you might not find it funny, but maybe I find it funny. One common example is that our skin color reuses the same tone. Imagine that our head is fair in complexion, our neck is dark in complexion, maybe our hands are red or something, maybe our feet are purple or something. Somehow it just doesn't, it just doesn't make sense, make as perfect sense as it probably currently does. So this is a beautiful way of using colors that already exist to make sense of the human body, which is a design in and of itself in its own right. Right. So this is how you use the repetition. So we use green, so we use white. Yeah, we use a lot of white here. You can see this color is white, this color is white, this color is white, and this present is green. It's the same color as this register via. It's the same color as this for more inquiry. So these are use repetition, and this is part of what the principle that guides using keeping the amount of colors you use in a design to maybe 3 at maximum, so that you reuse them in such a way that they form a cohesive whole, that they are not so in different worlds, that they don't look like they agree. So that's what repetition does. Repetition shows agreement, where the repetition just shows that you are reusing design elements, you are reinforcing a unified look, right? And it improves recognition, right? And if we look at brands, for instance, we see how brands use a lot of repetition to reinforce their brand image. For instance, you've seen MTN. Imagine that every time MTN shows up their logo, they show it in different colors and different styles. You see it today, you see the yellow. The other day, you see blue. Another day, you see purple. It reduces how much that MTN brand is reinforced in our mind, right? So that's obviously how we use. Sorry about your network issues. So that's how you use repetition to enforce, unity in a look, or in a design, right? So I'm going to talk about proximity. I want to move very fast here because I think I've taken everyone's time. I'm so sorry about this. I didn't know it was going to take this long, right? So we're going to talk about proximity, and proximity is just this. If you look at this design, you can see how elements are grouped together. If you don't already understand, you can see that this one just speaks of maybe the maybe convener or the host of this. It's in his own world. Then we see the main thing. They assemble themselves here, present 1 week free intensive training on graphic design using Canva, right? Then you see this, you can see this box that covers this place. It just groups the date and the venue together. So you can see how we are grouping. Imagine that you throw your dates here, then you come here to throw your time. You come here to throw maybe virtual here, or you put Canva here, you take Canva maybe somewhere else. So proximity or association is how you associate related elements together. What it also helps do for your audience is it helps them assimilate information from your designs the best way. So now in one way they've captured that, okay, this is about 1 week free intensive training. On another side, okay, they have captured that, okay, we've captured the date, the time, and where it is going to happen. It's not going to be physical, it's going to be virtual. Then the last section is how they are going to access the event. You can see that this gives you a link. This gives you the numbers you can contact. If you have problem with access, if you need to make more inquiries, and you have this logo. So you can see that in this design, you see grouping, you see association, you see how by proximity, we group related elements together that we are seeing on one place. What's this about? And okay, how do we get access? How do we sorry? When and yeah, when and where do we get access to this? And this is how do we get access to it, right? So I believe you understand this idea of proximity, such that when you are designing, you are going to look at that a lot. You're going to consider proximity a lot in your designs. Be you always. I can put B in this place. When I put B here and I move you to here, someone can read it as be always you. And maybe that's what you're trying to, do, but I mean, it may not make sense to me. But you can say always be you, and that actually even makes sense, right? But be you always is also another thing. But by doing this, by not putting them together in proximity, in close proximity, you are losing the attention of your audience. You are losing the ability to capture the information in your design in the most efficient way, right? By putting them together, you can already tell the user how you want them to read what is on this flyer, right? I hope you understand what proximity does, such that see that they even put this differently, because okay, if they had put this, it changes the way you probably would read it. They will probably say, "Be you always at great sight," and it doesn't make any meaning to them. But by separating it with spacing, by moving it in, with far proximity, what you've just done is made the audience understand that okay, this is a slightly different information. Yes, it contributes to the overall information that the design is trying to communicate, but it really belongs in a class or a category of its own. So maybe approach it slightly differently. That's what you use proximity to do, right? I hope you understand this. And so there's also another final what is it called? Another final principle I'll talk about is white space. And white space just means the empty space within the element, around or between your elements, right? What it does, it helps reduce clutter and allows designs to breathe. It helps reduce clutter and allows your designs to breathe, right? See the way it is. Imagine that everything in the design just clusters itself. It's just clustered in one place. Or you know what? Let's even use our own faces, for example. Imagine that our faces are not. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the feedback. Imagine that your eyes are not as separate as this. Everything is probably joined together. There's no space in between all the elements that make up your face. Your eyes maybe are overlapping each other. Your nose maybe tries to struggle or find its way in between your eyes. Your lips maybe just finds its way maybe beside your nose. It looks very funny and doesn't look organized. Maybe the reason we would not see that as weird is probably we've gotten used to the way our faces look. But imagine that there are no spaces around these elements, and maybe let's do it in such a way that let's even retain the position, but our faces are so small that we don't even have, it looks weird, right? And so if nature is even works that way by virtue of the way our bodies are designed, it means that a lot of things, white space is beautiful in designs. As you can see here, there's a lot of white space. You can see white space here, you can see white space, you can dance, you can find, and you know what, this is a way to make your design feel like it is breathing, right? It feels like it is not cluttered. It is not, if we change what this looks like and just make sure that all the elements are cramped up in a place, it really changes the way a design looks, right? And I would say again, like I said about the FedEx logo, there's a way you can use it to your advantage. And this is why I encourage experimentation as much as possible. All these things are more guidelines than they are very strict rules, right? So I don't want us to approach it like it must always be like that. I've come across a number of people who approach things that way. Maybe because personally, I'm generally a free thinker and I try to think of, I try to think of things and don't put boundaries around, things, too much boundaries around things, because I want that freedom of expression. But it also guides the way I approach design, right? It makes us what's it called? I really just use all of these elements to guide the way I approach designs. I've lost the train of my thoughts. Some people already noticed. But the whole idea of all this I'm talking about is know all these things, know that they exist. Know that they exist so that when you need to make designs from an empty page, you can begin to make sense of what you can begin to make sense of what you want to do, of all the things that can come together to make your design make sense, to inform the things you are doing. I've talked about negative spacing. Now, one thing I've not talked about is letter spacing. Let's play around with letter spacing here. This is letter line spacing. Sorry, we played around this line spacing here, but let's play with line. Sorry, we play with letter spacing. Sorry, beg your pardon. Letter spacing again is space between the individual letters of a word, right, or of a sequence of letters. Line spacing is the spacing between words or lines in a text. It might be paragraph, it might be, but let's do it like this. Let's take this and let's now increase the spacing along the line. See how it pushes them far apart. It is a way you can actually do it like this in a way that adds some interest to it. And so someone can say, but you'll not be able to know how to read this. Maybe something we can do is maybe even change the color of this. And so even by achieving this, there's some interest to this. I don't know if I'm alone, but I don't know why I'm finding this interesting. It might not be the best way to explain it, but this somehow looks interesting to me. We can obviously reduce the line spacing maybe to not make it look, but this is kind of the default. And by reducing it, it changes the way the design feels, and by giving it a different color, it just elevates the way it looks, right? So all these things we're supposed to use at our disposal. Consider all these things tools in a toolbox that you can use to begin to make sense. So in your design, in your design expressions, you want to have all these things at the back of your mind. And in the beginning, it might feel very stressful to be thinking of lines, shapes, typography, everything, sans serif font. Should I use this? Should I use that? But that's where experimentation again becomes important. By the time you experiment, you begin to find harmony in all these elements. You begin to find your own style. You begin to find the way you want to approach things. Something that also can be done here, I can increase this to something like this, and maybe I can change the color of this. What color can I use here? We can maybe begin to change the color of this. Maybe make it. Someone said something. Great job. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right. So come here again. So I love transparency a lot. I don't know why, but maybe just do something like this. Just try things out. Just try things out. If I would tell you that this is the image that gave birth to this pattern in the background, many people might not believe it. It is this image, this same thing that gave rise to this thing in the background. It was stretched in two different directions. One was at this corner, one was at this other corner, and it was stretched in order for it to lose this form, right? So you can see, if you can already imagine, you can already see how it expresses itself across it, and so it creates this kind of net or grid-like effect, right? But it is this same thing. So imagine that you just sit down with this ball and just decide to play with it as much as you can. You can even maybe put it here. You can just play around with it. You can put it on one corner of your design, maybe put another thing on this other corner to achieve balance, right? Something, you just play around with it. That's what experimentation is for. So I'll go again. The basic elements of design: lines, shapes, typography, color, most importantly. Then principles of design: balance, contrast, hierarchy, alignment, repetition, proximity, white space. All of these things, you begin to think about them when you do design. Even if you take an already existing what is it called, template, you just have all these things at the back of your mind to make it even seem different, that someone might not even be able to tell that you actually took it from a template, an existing template on Canva. And what this understanding helps you do is to make even better use of the free version of Canva, because now it means you can play around with all of these elements and all these principles, play around with them and create an endless possibility of designs, right? That you can sit with one design and create different expressions of it. Well, I hope you understand all of these things, right? So all this is about just contributing to your design mindset and developing an eye for design. So how you have to use this. So now I want us to now begin to develop something called keen observation and asking a lot of whys, right? What do I mean by this? Any design you come across, I want you to just not have a passive interaction with it or passive relationship with it, but what's it called? Approach it in such a way that you are trying to justify, why did this person use this? Why was this color used? That's how you begin to know and tell designs different from one another. You begin to look at it. Oh, why did they use this? Why did they use this font? Why does this grab my? Why do I like this element in this design? By the time you begin to do that, you're exercising your mind. You're exercising your mind and how to think as a designer. You're trying to just use keen observation, asking a lot of why is this? And truthfully speaking, this lends itself to many disciplines. Actually, it is not just in design. Across disciplines, if you make this a personal principle in life, it really does help that you observe the things that other people have done enough to find out the justification for every single element. So in a design, you're looking at it, you're trying to figure out, okay, why is this like this? Why is this like this? Why was this like this? Why was this used? Why was this thing tilted this way? Oh, if you tilted this way, oh, it will change the way it feel. Why does this small thing just affect, just create this big effect? Oh, if I change this color from red to brown, does it do anything new to the design? Does it change the way I feel about this design? Right? You need to do a lot of those observations. See, even as far as even looking at anything that has design whatsoever, it might just be your pot in your the design, the sticker on the pot in your kitchen. It might just be anything. It might just be a frame in your parlor, the television set, maybe the news when they are casting news on channels. You're just looking at all the elements. Oh, why did they use blue? Yeah, why did they use red? The more you do that, the more you exercise your design mind, right? And that's why all of these things we've talked about helps you. Oh, I see a line there. You're able to identify the elements in the design. Then you're able to identify the principles upon which those elements come together, or around which those elements come together. Do you understand? So that's really how we want to be thinking about design. So it is one thing to now to use the tool, like I mentioned in the beginning. A carpenter has a saw, has a planer, has a sandpaper, and has lots of these things, a glue, all of these things. But you begin to know how to think, and that's really what separates designers. It separates us from one another. How we begin to think, how our mind is formed around designs. But I hope everyone understands what we've talked about so far, right? So, and I want to also encourage us to do a lot of replication and experimentation. I've said experimentation probably 1,000 times on this call. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I really appreciate this. All right. So, yeah, do a lot of replication. What do I mean by that? If you find a design that captures your attention, try to replicate it, try to recreate it. By doing so, you are obviously exercising yourself. See, the way your mind works is that the more tools you give it to work with, the more you can bring out of it, right? Your mind works to the extent of what you've put inside yourself, right? The more extent of what you've put inside yourself, the more you read, is the more you can, you've internalized a lot of other people's ideas. And the more you do that, you can bring out more of those ideas, and they can combine themselves in such a way that it is unique to you, right? I hope you understand that. In that same way, when we also do design, the more you replicate other people's designs, the more you also exercise your ability to recreate what is in your mind. One thing for us to understand is that our mind usually ahead of what we can actually do. And what do I mean by that? I'm sure many people here, like myself, in my head, I am a great dancer. I have lots of a million dance steps in my head. But if I'm to dance in real life, I'm a very terrible dancer. Now, how do I begin to? Now, I've watched a lot of dance movies, and so maybe those moves are in my head. I have my siblings are very good dancers. I'm probably the worst dancer in my family. But yeah, I don't feel bad about it. Right. So I just by observing, I've realized that in my head I've accumulated all of those steps, but I cannot necessarily bring. Oh, thank you so much. I'm not alone. So like I've not necessarily exercised myself in dancing enough to bridge the gap between what I have in my imagination and what I can actually do, right? So this is something that replication does. So how can I do it in the form of dancing? Is by trying to dance as often as possible, right, in reality, to be able to bring out what is in my mind in such a way that as time goes by, I am able to do the things that are in my head. Yes. And so that's how design works too. You can look at things, you might have different beautiful ideas in your head, and that is normal for you to have designs in your head, but it only will stay in your head if you are not able to replicate and recreate them. As you create all the things you see, it might even just be this interface that I'm looking at right now. Just sit with it. You see a lot of circles, a lot of boxes. It might just be something as simple as this. Okay, I see this X. How can I form that X in Canva? I can take two lines and put them like this. Very beautiful. What else can I see here that we can replicate? All of this other stuff. I can see an arrow. along. If you can see my screen, this arrow that you can see beside this thing button, you can use two lines also to achieve it. You can see how just by basic understanding of certain things, you can begin to make sense. And the more you replicate, the more you even find, you even get very familiar with Canva, and you're able to make the best use of the free version. So all this conversation is just to help you develop a design mindset, to know how to think about design, how to approach it. So I want to challenge everyone here, as you go on from today, everything you see, try to spare some moments of your life. Spare some moment of your life to, I think I'm having network issues. Is everything fine? Spare some moment. Am I still in this call? Can anyone still hear me? It's a weird thing that my this thing is doing. Can anyone still hear me? Please confirm if you can hear me. Wow. Sorry, I think I'm having a glitch of some sort. Okay, I don't know if anyone can hear me. Oh, system is behaving.
We can hear you over here.
Okay, then maybe I should just continue. My system, the way the screen is behaving is very weird, but I'll just keep talking. So yeah, so I just want to challenge you. Every time you encounter, it might be a book cover, it might be anything, just about anything. So as you just you come across any design, anything, it might be the way your wristwatch looks. You can just sit around Canva and try to replicate it. The more you do that, the more ideas you put in your head, the more you exercise your muscle for creation. And so the more you do that, the more. And one thing you can do also is, after designing this, you can ask yourself, okay, what better way can I design this? And as you go, you're exercising your creative mind as often as possible. Thank you, Caroline, for putting this: replication and recreation, observation and practice. Do that a lot. Anything you observe, look at billboards, look at cans, maybe in pick meal cans, look at maybe your deodorant design, look at it, ask yourself, okay, how can I come about, how can I recreate something like that? Or ask yourself, oh, why did they put this? Why is this logo bigger than everything? Is it that that's what they want us to do? We talked about hierarchy today. Maybe that's the most important thing they want you to see, right? So you just look at these things, and I want us to do this as often as possible, so that you can become like second nature to us. Because as time goes by, you wouldn't actually now need to think of these things. The truth is, when this design was coming about, the person who designed it did not necessarily consciously think of all these elements. For instance, this association, proximity, wasn't necessarily thought about. It was, and why I have to say that is because in the beginning times, the person did it consciously enough. There's something called, I'm sure some of us know what conscious competence is and unconscious competence. At some point, conscious competence is you have competence, but you are still conscious about delivering, or doing something that what's it called, with that competence. But it comes to a point, it becomes so second nature that you don't have to think about it. It sits in your reflex on your subconscious mind, that you just find yourself doing things and taking those decisions, those super conscious decisions. It's only probably when you now do it, you now realize that, oh, while I didn't consciously think about this thing came together beautifully. Right? It is so beautiful that, but we have to first do it consciously enough to actually get to the point where you can just do it, at the snap of a finger. But I hope this has taught us a few things about design. I really hope that this has not been anyone's waste of time. I hope this has not been anyone's waste of time. I cannot see my screen anymore. So if you've left comments, I really cannot see it. But it has been such a beautiful time, and I'm so sorry for spending this much time, talking. I didn't think it was going to take this long, and I hope it has really not been anyone's waste of time. So thank you very much, and I would just by now hand over to the convener. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Diary. That was a very wonderful session. Yeah, so okay, quickly, let's just go to the question time. I've already enabled you to enabled unmuting yeah, enabled unmuting. So since he can't see the screen, so well, you can
Sorry,
either type your questions
sorry.
or you.
Can I quickly leave and join and see if that works? Just give me like 30 seconds to 1 minute. Just leave and
All
join.
right, okay.
Thank you.
All right, does anybody have any questions so far? If anybody has any questions so far, can you ask your question If not, we'll just believe you understand every single thing that has been taught. Okay, if you have a question, please just raise your hand so that once it comes back online, we'll call you. But if you don't raise your hand, no question for you. So does anybody have a question? Please let's see your hands. Please just hit the raise hand button. The count of 10, if there is no hand raised, no question. Okay, it's your additional one. Who else? One. At count of 10, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, just the same as a question. Okay, Barry, let's know if you are online.
Okay, I don't really have a question. I want to say thank you so much for organizing this program. Thank you for the trainers. You are so amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're
That is
welcome,
all.
ma'am.
Thank you so
All
much.
right, thank you ma'am, for that. Thank you. Okay, so that
I think another
is
great wants to ask a question.
okay now. Okay, well,
I just want to say that the trainer was amazing. Such an amazing and blissful session.
Thank you. I could not be blushing on camera, but yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. Everything. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And no, it wasn't a time wasted. It was worth every single minute. So thank you. All right. So in the absence of any question, we believe everybody understands. Yeah, I believe everybody understands. And you can just go, and it's something you should actually go back to listen to over and over again till you're able to really develop that design mindset. All right. Thank you everyone. Let's just say a word of prayer. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for tonight. Thank you for this wonderful session. Thank you for what you've taught us. Thank you for enlightenment. Thank you for opening our eyes to things we didn't even know. Thank you for the grace to learn. We say, take all the glory, Lord, in Jesus' name. We pray that all that we've learned would actually stick for everyone and it will bear much fruit in our career and our personal endeavors. In Jesus' name, we say you bless the trainers, the triple trainers for this particular training. And we pray that you replenish them in Jesus' name. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Good night.
Nice.
Good night,
Nice.
everyone. Good night. Have a wonderful night's rest and see you tomorrow. Tomorrow should be our last class. All right, but we'll give an announcement very soon. So have a wonderful night's rest, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you.